آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. Today I continue what I started yesterday, talking about the concept of humbleness, and the way I'm looking at it is by looking at its opposites. Humbleness is a topic that has, technically speaking, 4 opposites, which is something rare. As a concept, it is the sum of both having confidence and having humility towards others. Its opposites are vanity and arrogance on one side, and low self-esteem and feeling inferior on the other. All of which are refused Islamically. All of which are feelings, thoughts, and perspectives that you should not have as a person. Yesterday I talked about vanity, the first level of the pendulum. And it's not vain for you to know that you're good at something. For you to be able to say that you're good at something is not vain. Yusuf alayhi salam said, "Inni hafidhun alim," right? "Ij'alni ala khaza'in al-ard." Make me the person responsible for, make me the treasurer of this nation. I know how to do this. I can keep track of things and I'm knowledgeable in terms of how to distribute it. Knowing that you're good at something is not vanity, unless you allow the fact that you're good at something make you feel better as a person in general. Unless you use that as a reason to increase your self-value, and then in that case, then it becomes a problem. Otherwise, if it's not, if your self-value is fixed, it's the same, you don't derive value from being good at doing something, then making that statement is not a problem. I am good at this. That's not an issue. Praising people for what they do is important. We are obligated to recognize what people are good at. We're obligated to recognize the goodness, the strength, the qualities, the skills of other people, and to compliment them for it. That is our obligation. They are obligated not to allow that to go to their heads, not to allow that to change their view of themselves and their personal self-value. That's their jobs, not ours. The Prophet, however, alayhi salatu wasalam, did point out to us that we must be careful when we compliment people. The hadith muttafaq alayhi, قال قطعتم ظهر الرجل. He once used that term, alayhi salatu wasalam. You're breaking his back. And what they were doing at the time is that they were over-complimenting him. They were sucking up. They were trying to find a way to get something out of this person. So they were saying things that weren't even true. But this is our obligation to do that. When the pendulum swings in the opposite direction, you feel less about yourself. Just like when it goes towards vanity, you have to praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and bring it back, hold it back to the middle, reminding yourself of the reality of how you achieved your goals and what effort you actually put in, and the fact that you don't know whether Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees you praiseworthy for the effort that you put in, to bring it back to the middle. When you feel less about yourself, you do the same thing. You remind yourself that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you. So with the mere merit that He created you subhanahu wa ta'ala, means He put potential in you. That potential is nothing that anyone that can take away from you. No one can take that away from you because it was instilled in you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is divine in nature. So remind yourself of that when you feel less about yourself. A lot of what you do in Tazkiyah is just mental exercises. It's psychological acrobatics. That's really what it is. You're continuously reminding yourself of topics, of ideas, of thoughts, of realities. Today we're going to talk about the second level of the pendulum, when it swings and goes towards arrogance. Arrogance is different. If vanity is you determining how much praise you deserve for what you do, and giving yourself more credit than you probably deserve for what you've achieved. Arrogance is how you see yourself in comparison with others. Arrogance, you have to have other people. If you are living alone on an island, all your life, you can't really be arrogant. It's impossible for you to be arrogant, unless somehow you figure out a way to be arrogant towards the fish or some other creation, which takes a lot of work because it's hard for you to compare yourself to something that's very different to you. Like mentally, the human brain doesn't really allow for that. You're comparing yourself to an animal, that's not the same. You can still find a way to be arrogant, but it's not as easy. So arrogance is something that it requires you to compare yourself to someone whom you believe is a peer, whom you've accepted that they are a peer to me, so you're going to allow yourself to feel more or less. This happens a lot in our lives. We do this almost automatically at all times. Someone new walks into the room, we size them up really quickly. Our brain sizes them up really quickly, and we start to make parameters of this person. And then we allow ourselves to pass judgment on them, filling in the gaps of who they are with information that we don't have, breaking them down to one or two words as human beings, which, if you think about it, is something absolutely horrific, and you don't want people to do to you. You don't want someone to break you down in 2 or 3 words. Fulan, 1, 2, 3, and then, of course, we throw in shaif halu, arrogant. It's an extremely dangerous thing to say that about someone. When you say that about someone, you are declaring that this person is not going to Jannah. لا يدخل الجنة من كان في قلبه مثقال ذرة من كبر. Right? They're not going to Jannah because they're arrogant, right? And you're basing it on what? The way they walked, the way one interaction, how they spoke. What do you know about them? What do you really know about this person? Are you okay people passing judgment on you when you are first introduced into a group based on one thing that you do? Are you okay being broken down? Everything about who you are, the complexity of your human experience, and everything that you are, all of your hopes and your dreams and your struggles and are you okay people just using one word to describe you? It breaks you, it reduces the value of a human being in a way that's extremely demeaning. So beware of filling in the gaps. I'm saying, well, I don't know his story, so I'm just going to assume that this person was raised with everything they needed, that this person always thinks they're better than others, that this person is just innately evil. Doing that has nothing to do with them, has everything to do with you. That is a problem you carry. You need to find a way to see people to be inferior to you in order for you to feel better about yourself. This happens most when someone threatens you. Not threatens you with a fist, threatens you in terms of their presence. You derive value from something that you do well, and then they walk in and they're in your same field, and they're a little bit better than you on it. They've been doing it longer. They know how to do it a little bit better. You feel threatened because you're deriving value from doing this thing. You feel like your value is all within this profession, your proficiency in doing something. Now someone walked in who's doing it a little bit better or equal. So you start looking for flaws. Everyone does this. You look for flaws. You start watching. Are they married? Have kids? What else do they have? How much money do they have? Where do they live? What type of car? How do they treat? You keep on looking until you find one thing that they don't do too well, that you think you do better. Like, all right, fine, khalas. I feel good now. I found the one thing that they're less than me at. Now I can feel better about myself. No, this is not a way to live. If you feel good, so this is an important this is an important thing to think about. If you feel good because others are less, you will feel less when others are good. And that's not a way to live. That's not a way to live. Don't live in comparison with others. You compare yourself to yourself, the past version of yourself. You compare yourself, you're in competition with yourself. You're looking, what is it that I can do better to make myself better? Not comparing myself to someone else. How do you compare yourself to someone else? It's like comparing apples and oranges. What do you know about them? You guys aren't starting from the exact same spot. You don't know what hand they were dealt when they were born. You don't know what their psyche is made of. You don't know what experiences they went through. You don't know their trauma. You don't know their opportunities. You don't know anything. You can assume, but you don't know. All of Tazkiyah, 90% of Tazkiyah, is based on the fact that you have to differentiate between what you know and what you assume. And they are not the same thing. And you're not allowed to pass judgment on anything if you don't know for sure. If you assume, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ta'abbadaka bihusni al-dhann. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked you to worship Him through having good assumptions in people. Outside of a partnership in business, someone knocking on your door for marriage, you have good assumptions. And the third one is when you're mentoring someone. My students, my children, I assume the worst at all times. That's my job. It's my job. If they don't want to be my students, then they tell me and I stop assuming bad things about them. Because my job is to educate and teach and allow them to, I have to assume bad things all the time. My children, I will do that all the time. You're going to do that. If you don't do that with your children, you end up extremely disappointed later. You have to assume bad things. You have to assume so that you can catch problems and you can educate, you can teach. But you don't know what people are giving. You don't know where their starting point is. You guys aren't starting at the same point, so how do we compare? How do we compete if we're not at the same point start? I don't know people's khitam. Let's say this person's a kafir. One of the worst things you can do is to feel better than others because of religiosity. One of the worst things you can do in the world is take the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of hidayah and use it as means to feel better than others because he doesn't have guidance. Do you know their khitam? Do you know your khitam? Do you know how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will end things for both of you? You don't. Then what are you doing? Then what are you doing? You have no idea how their khitam is going to be, nor yours. So you keep that in. There is no excuse ever for feeling better than other people. Using their status and your status to feel better. There's a million things. All of it. You don't know this. It's assumptions. It's based on lack of clarity. You don't know who's closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who's going to be at the end more pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you allowed yourself to look down and condescend to someone whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves more than you, then Yawm al-Qiyamah you're running a it's a very dangerous behavior that you've engaged in. And this is why, so the example in the Quran is Iblis. The example in the Quran of arrogance, Iblis. Iblis is a very interesting figure to study and understand because the stories in the Quran 6 or 7 times, repeated time and time again. قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ لَمْ يَكُنْ مِنَ السَّاجِدِينَ قَالَ مَا مَنَعَكَ أَلَّا تَسْجُدَ إِذْ أَمَرْتُكَ قَالَ أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِّنْهُ خَلَقْتَنِي مِنْ نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتَهُ مِنْ طِينٍ قَالَ فَاهْبِطْ مِنْهَا فَمَا يَكُونُ لَكَ أَن تَتَكَبَّرَ فِيهَا فَاخْرُجْ إِنَّكَ مِنَ الصَّاغِرِينَ. Iblis was of such worship and status and closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Rabbna elevated him, removed him from this earth, and put him in Jannah with the Malaika. He was the one amongst the Malaika that did not fit because he wasn't a Malak, he was a jinn. He was from a different creation. He was made from a smokeless flame, and Malaika are from Nur. But he had worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the point where he deserved to be there. That's how close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Iblis had brought himself. But Iblis allowed for this disease, arrogance, to fester inside of him slowly. He let it go unchecked. He didn't question himself on it. He didn't go back and take a look, where am I deriving my value from? What am I allowing? So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam, and he told the Malaika, Adam and Iblis amongst them, he told him specifically, honor Adam, show Adam respect because I love him, because I see potential in him. Iblis couldn't do it. Well, first of all, he hasn't done anything yet. I have been worshipping you for Allahu A'lam how long. He has done nothing. So based on what is he better than me? He hasn't done anything. If it's based on merit, he has no merit. He hasn't even woken up. So I don't know why I'm showing him respect. If it's based on origin, on nature, I am from a smokeless flame. He's from teen. He's from salsal min hama'im masnoon. He's made of something he's a mix. He's a mix of, I don't know, what is this? Why, based on what is he better than me? So he allowed himself to walk down that. So he compared. And the whole point of the story is that arrogance can get you to that point. Arrogance can get you to the point where you say, would anyone here, if anyone was there, in Iblis' place, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you a direct command to perform something, would you say no? You say no? You just did exactly what he did. If you said, no, I would never do that, you just exactly did what he did. So you're telling me that you're better than him. You know for sure that had you been in Iblis' place, you would have immediately prostrated. You know that? How do you know that? How do you know that you would have done that? How do you know that you would have made that decision? You just fell into the same trap that he did. You just decided that you are better, that you know better, that you would have never done that. You can have the assumption, you say, Ya Rabb, had I been in that position, Ya Rabb, make me a person who would have prostrated to you, Ya Rabb. That I would not have allowed arrogance to do that to me, Ya Rabb. But you don't know that for sure. The whole point of the story is that you don't know that. And if you allow yourself to say, no, I wouldn't have done that. Really? You know that for sure? You have the knowledge that if you were in Iblis's place, if you had lived Iblis's life, and you were in his position, you would have said, no, I wouldn't do this. That is an assumption you have about yourself that you have no knowledge to back up. You cannot back that up. You can hope that you would have done the right thing, but you don't know. And stating that you know, there's a little bit of arrogance in that. That's what arrogance is. But I know, I'm better than Iblis. For sure, I'm better than him. That's the hope we're trying to be. That's what we're trying to do. That's why this story is there. That's why we're reading the book. That's why we're trying to improve ourselves. We're studying this so that we can try and be. But we don't know that for sure. We don't know. The whole point of the story is that if you don't take care of yourself, if you allow your arrogance to go unchecked, then it can turn into a monster, and it can make you defy God when he speaks to you directly. This is what it can do. This is the power of arrogance. It's an absolutely, it's one of the most dangerous things that exists in the universe. It can turn you into a monster where you defy Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, for you to take this example and understand it a little bit more deeply, I want you to imagine someone who has mistreated you. Someone who has done the worst things you can imagine to yourself. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly commands you to go and serve that person. Yeah. Would you be able to do it? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose the person whom you despise on this earth the most for something that they did to you, for some mazlama that happened, would you be able to actually go and serve them and put yourself at their mercy if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded you to? See, now you're struggling. If you can think of someone you despise, now you're struggling. Yeah, I'll do anything, Ya Rabbi, just not this. Anything you want. There's no, but not this. There's no such thing. Whatever he commands, subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's what's going to happen. If in your heart, like, I don't know, well, there's a problem. There's a problem. Inshallah, you're not going to be in this situation, inshallah ta'ala. I'm just getting you to think about this. Because Iblis, he was willing to do anything for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this specifically, he just couldn't get over it. He couldn't get over it. And he was offered a way out. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to him and told him, this is takabbur, don't do this. He was offered a way out. He didn't take it. He committed himself to the end. He was willing to go to Jahannam just to prove his point. Just to prove that he was correct when he knows Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more than we do. He was in the vicinity of the angels. He lived with them. He knows things that we have no access to knowing. And yet his arrogance was so powerful that he could not get over himself. The story in the Quran is there to warn me and to warn you of what takabbur, of what arrogance can do to you. If you derive value from comparisons, if that's the only way you can validate your existence by comparing yourself to others, then at some point you may be stuck. You may not be able to get over it. The antidote for takabbur is istighfar. Similarly to vanity, it was hamd. For takabbur, for arrogance, is istighfar. Why is that? If you are focused on your sins, if your focus is on your shortcomings, and you're focused on the fact that you're making mistakes, and you're seeking forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have no time to focus on other people's flaws. The only way you can be arrogant is if you look for people's flaws, if you're searching for them. If you can find a flaw, and you don't have that flaw per se, then you can allow yourself to feel better. You can allow yourself, even though they may be better than you in everything, but I found a flaw, and I'm not like that. So you allow yourself to derive value from the fact that they have that flaw, and you're going to fill your heart with that because of the flaw you found. If you are focused on your personal flaws, you don't have time to look at other people's flaws. You're not searching for it because you're preoccupied by your own. You're continuously seeking forgiveness. Another thing is, if you're always doing istighfar, that means that your knowledge of your sins is very clear. I don't have knowledge of your sin. I have assumptions of your sin. I know mine. I don't know. I look at you, I have no idea. I can assume that you've done bad things, but I don't know. I know, but I know what this guy's done. I know very well what this guy has done. So how is it that I'm going to allow my assumption to beat my own knowledge? I'm going to allow my assumption of you? I'm going to draw conclusions from my assumption of you? Or do I draw conclusions from the knowledge of myself, of what I've done? Either way, you're not required. Humbleness does not mean that you don't enjoy your successes. Humbleness does not mean that you feel inferior to people, that you allow yourself to feel less than everyone around you. This is not what humbleness means. Humbleness is understanding the reality. That's all humbleness is. What is the reality? The reality is I don't know anything about people. Even if they're your siblings, even if they're your children, you don't know their psychological build. You don't know how they perceive the world around them. You don't know. Siblings fight a lot because of that. Because like we were born in the same house, we were raised the same way. They should be better than this, right? They should. They should, you say. Yes, maybe they should. But you have no true knowledge of that. That's why we get upset with our siblings, because we assume that they should be behaving better because we had the same upbringing. You don't know that. You don't know. Yeah, but he's my twin. I understand, but you don't know what his life was. You weren't sitting inside his head. You weren't inside of him perceiving the world. You don't know how he perceives the world. You don't know. So when you assume, you're making an assumption. That one, you can't base anything on that one ever. Humbleness is just understanding the reality. What's the reality? The reality is I know nothing about people, that I only know things about myself, that my value is fixed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need me to prove my value to him. My self-value does not need to be proven. What you do need to prove is your value to the team. That is not arrogance. I am very valuable on an oncology team. I am not very valuable on an MBA team. If I allow myself to derive value from that statement, that's my problem. If I feel like I'm more valuable because I'm good because I have value on a cancer team, and I allow myself to feel less about myself because an MBA team won't allow me to dribble with them, then that's my perception, that's my problem. I am deriving value from what I'm good at and what I can do. You are required as a person to prove your value to a team. You're a part of a team, prove that you can actually do a function, that you can help this team function. That has nothing to do, theoretically speaking, with your self-value. And I need you to be able to learn to differentiate the two and snip off any connections between being valuable as a team member, being valuable to your ummah, to your community, to your family, and being just valuable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's not the same thing. I'm trying to prove that I'm valuable to this ummah for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it's not changing who I am. I don't become more of a human being or less of a human being if I fail at doing that. I continue to be the same person with the same rights and the same value. This is very, very important to understand. This is the essence of it all. How does humbleness manifest itself? Humbleness manifests itself through service. That's the outcome of humbleness. The outcome of humbleness, when you understand the reality of who I am, when I understand my reality, I am a servant. I am a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A servant is of no value to his master if he has a big ego. Imagine this. And we don't have servants anymore, at least not in the same sense, but imagine back in the day when there were servants within this analogy. If you had a servant, and if you told him to do something, no, I don't do that type of stuff. No, you have to speak to me better than this. No, I don't like the way you... That's not a good servant. This is a garbage servant. You need to get rid of you. You don't want him. You get rid of him, fire him, get someone else. I need a servant who is good. He'll come. Go, he'll go. Do this, pick this up, take that. He's okay with this stuff. He's like, nope, I don't like that. You're not speaking to me appropriately. I don't do this type of work. That person I don't serve. I don't help that person. Yeah, that's not what a servant is. If I am a servant to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having an ego goes against the whole purpose of me being a servant to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I am of no value to him subhanahu wa ta'ala at all if I'm walking around with an ego. Because what type of servant has an ego? Having this is a problem. So you understand your reality, that you don't know how Allah sees other people. And you don't know how he sees you. So you have no reason to assume anything. You have no way to say I am better than them or they are better than me. Maybe you stop looking at them altogether. Maybe we stop having assumptions. Maybe we stop comparing altogether. Maybe we stop trying to make ourselves more than what we are or less than what we are. We stop doing that. We figure out what we're here to do. We are servants, so we serve. And then what ends up happening when that becomes the clarity of this whole story, what ends up happening is that you start serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you compete in that service. My job becomes competing and serving you to show Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala I'm a good servant. You created me as a servant, I'm being the best servant I can. So our competition goes from trying to feel better than one another, or trying to prove that we're better, right? Trying to get my head a bit higher than yours, trying to prove that I'm a little bit smarter, I'm a little bit stronger, I'm a little bit more wealthy, I'm wittier, I'm more capable, I'm more popular, I'm more this, I'm more that. It goes from that, because that's useless, because even if I am more popular or stronger or wittier, it doesn't mean I'm better as a person, because unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells me that, I don't know that, so there's no point in doing it. But what I do know is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Yawm al-Qiyamah, is going to judge me based on how good of a servant I was. That's what I know. I know that in akramakum indallahi atqakum, that the best of you on the day of judgment in the eyes of Allah are the ones who are the most taqwa, those who perform the most service to their fellow human being, to the world they lived in. So my competition becomes, I'm going to serve you more than you're going to serve me. I'm going to be a better servant, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants me more reward. It's not, you see, if you are confident in your self-value, it doesn't bother you to be of service to someone else. It doesn't bother you if someone said something condescending or rude to you. It doesn't threaten you, because they can't touch you, because your self-value is divine. It can't be touched. When you get upset, it's because they were able to get inside your head. It's because you still derive value from your social status, and they played on that chord, and it bothered you. Now you feel less about yourself, so you retaliate with anger. You retaliate with anger. It's not about them. That person was rude. Don't get me wrong. You're not supposed to allow people to overstep your boundaries. Don't turn into a doormat. That's not what I'm teaching here. The point of this lesson is not to turn into a doormat where you have no self-esteem and you're not allowed to hold your own integrity. That's not what I'm teaching. But when people say things to harm you, to try and put you down, for you to allow that to do that to you means that you are still deriving value from social status, and they figured that out, and they have your button and they press it to make you feel less about yourself. But if you don't, that's why the Prophet ﷺ, it never bothered him. People would say everything about him. Didn't matter. Didn't matter. Because he knew who he was worshiping. He knew the relationship he had with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's all that matters. The only opinion that matters is the opinion of the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything else doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter. If you're confident in who you are, people can say and they can scream it and they can post it. It means nothing. It never did to begin with. They're not getting to you. You still will correct it. You will still correct that behavior. But there's a difference between correcting it when you're angry because you felt that your self-value was threatened versus you're calm. You're like, no, I don't like people treating me that way or speaking to me that way. But you don't touch me. You have nothing on me. You can't make me feel less about myself or more about myself. When you come and you flatter me, I'm still the same. When you come and you put me down, I'm still the same. Whether they carry you on their shoulders and call and chant your name or pull you in the mud, it's the same thing, because my value is not taken from you to begin with. It doesn't mean that you won't correct behaviors when people are behaving in a way that's inappropriate to you. This is a very, very important piece that has to be understood. And humbleness turns into into a community of individuals that are competing in showing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala their service to others. They're looking for that. And that changes, imagine, it turns the tables around. If I'm sitting and I feel entitled and I feel I should be served and I'm assuming bad things in others and I'm trying to feel better than them, turn this table around, ya akhi, for a moment. Turn it around. Assume good things in others. See their potential. Hold yourself accountable and put yourself in a position of service. This is how we're supposed to be. We are functioning, fortunately, the absolute opposite of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to function as. We are doing the absolute opposite of what we're supposed to be doing. We're assuming all the bad things in others, allowing ourselves to feel superior to them, feeling entitled about what we have, feeling entitled to having more, and feeling the feeling that people should see that in us and should appreciate that in us, and feeling that we should be served. No. You have to turn this around. It's the absolute opposite. And when you turn that around, you function better. You feel better. You live better. And then you have humbleness. You have that confidence in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's potential in you. Confidence that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant you opportunities to do good things and He will reward you for them. And you have humility. You don't see yourself better than people, but you don't see yourself less than people either. You're not occupied or preoccupied by who is better and who is less. It doesn't matter to you. You see something good in them, you appreciate it, you compliment it, you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase them, and then you compete with yourself and looking, where was I before? Where am I now? Where can I be later on? And you push yourself. And yes, maybe Fulan has more PhDs than you do, but it doesn't bother you because you're competing with yourself. You're trying to improve yourself. And they're doing the same for themselves. And there's no need to look at it that way. Well, the only way I can validate my existence is if I have a certain, no. This has to go away. We have to teach our youth not to feel that way. Our kids have to understand that you don't need to prove your self-value. It's there. Alhamdulillah, it's there. Stop comparing yourself to others. Stop trying to be better. Stop feeling less. Because that pendulum, once it swings in one direction, you let it go, it will swing right to the other direction. Narcissists, psychopaths, are people who have it fixed in one place. It's fixed, it's over here. It won't move. It got stuck. Right? Some mental health problems is when it gets stuck in the other one. Both of them require help. They require support. They require a certain degree of therapy and sometimes medications to help it. But the general public is where most people, it swings. It swings with life and what happens until you learn to cut off any affiliations and hold it down nice and steady, right in the middle, where you continue to be confident in Allah, where you have humility with people around you, and you behave with humbleness, competing with others in serving the people around you, so that you show Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you're the best servant that you can possibly be, asking for the ajr yawm al-qiyamah. I'm going to end with that, inshallah ta'ala. This is a topic that has at least maybe 3 or 4 more hours of content. I can tell you that this has been the most difficult series that I have put together since I started doing a post-Fajr series. This is very, very stressful and hard because the amount of information that I should be sharing with you is very, very high. And the time that we have is very, very limited. And if I don't share with you proper information, then I can put you at risk. I'm going to end with 2 concepts quickly. Number 1, if you don't have humbleness, I want you to imagine this. If you don't have humbleness, then everything I teach you from this moment forward is walking, wal-iyadu billah, you down a path that ends with Jahannam, wal-iyadu billah. You will learn Islam, allow it to make you vain and arrogant, and that walks you down a path of Jahannam. If you don't have humbleness inside, then anything you learn will harm you. Because لا يدخل الجنة من كان في قلبه مثقال ذرة. If there's a speck of kibr inside of you, you don't enter Jannah. So imagine learning Islam and that feeding into your vanity, feeding into your arrogance. How is that going to help you? That makes things worse. You get harmed by the more knowledge that you have, because Tazkiyah is a powerful thing. It gives you knowledge of yourself. It gives you control. It allows you to understand people psychologically and mentally. And it allows you to understand yourself psychologically and mentally. Make decisions. If that is not bathed in humbleness, if it's not based on a foundation of understanding who you are, the reality of what we are, it's very dangerous. Once, Sheikh Qayyim Raji Hafidhahullah came and visited us in our house in 2003 or 4. He used to come to the village and attend weddings. Hafidhahullah. He's over 100 years old right now, so this was around 20 years ago, and he was in his 80s. And he came to our house after one of the weddings and sat in the living room. And of course, a lot of the people and the students came into the house, so the house was very busy. And the Sheikh, every time he drank, we put a cup of tea for him. He would take a sip, someone could pick up the cup and then drink from wherever he drank, and they were doing all this stuff around him. He's an old man in the 80s. He can't fight this anymore. He's too tired to fight this off. And they were doing this, and they told him, Ya Sheikh, hadithna. I remember this happening in our living room. Tell us a story. Benefit us with wisdom. Tell us something, right? So he said the following, unsolicited. This is just what he said. He told the following story. He said there was a imam, a great imam, the imam of imams, who lived in a part of Sham. تُشَدْ إِلَيْهِ الرِّحَالِ. People would seek this imam out in terms of learning from this person and from all over the place. He was of great knowledge. Everyone spoke of his greatness and spoke of his knowledge and spoke of this and spoke of that. This is him telling us the story. I remember who he is, and he's one of the Shaykh Qurra' Sham. He's telling us the story. He said, and one day in his dream, he saw himself. He saw himself in his dream fil akhirah. And he saw Iblis, la'anahullah. And Iblis was polishing hooks. He was polishing hooks. That's what Iblis was doing. Hooks from every size. A hook that was as big as a planet. and a hook that was as small as a molecule. You couldn't see it with your own eye. And he's polishing them all. And he would ask Iblis, what are these? And he tells them that on the day of judgment, once it's time, I hook the people that I was able to deviate or lead astray. When I'm thrown into Jahannam, I pull them down all with me. So he's looking at these hooks. So he asks him, who is that big hook for, the biggest of them all? فقال هذا لفلان رجل مسن يجلس في مسجدك عند الأحذية لا يعرفه أحد. This is for an elderly man. He's 80 years old. He sits at the end of the masjid close to the shoes. He doesn't say a word. I've been trying to get him for years and I can't seem to get him. So I prepared the biggest hook of all to see if I can get him. So in his mind, this alim, this imam, this sheikh, this qudwa says, okay, I must be the one after that. Well, he's the biggest imam, so he's assuming that the biggest hook is for him. So he said, I must be the one behind it. So what about the second biggest hook? Who is that for? Well, that's for fulan. What about the third biggest hook? Well, that's for fulan. And he asks about all the hooks, coming down to the hook that cannot be seen with the eye. Who is that? And he counts people he knows, but he doesn't count him. The imam gets offended. He gets offended, even though you don't want Iblis caring for you, but it does feel, when you're left out, it's not nice, when Iblis doesn't think you're worthy of a hook. So he's quiet for a bit, but he can't help himself. And he says, yeah, Iblis, where's my hook? Where's my hook? فَقَالَ أَنْتَ سَبَقْتَنِي مِنْ زَمَانٍ. You don't need a hook. You're going to fall before me. You're going in before me. There's no need for a hook. Why would I get a hook for you? Look at the arrogance in you. Look how much you think of yourself. You know I don't need to waste any time on you. You've done worse than I did. You're going to fall before me. He told us his story in our house. As people were kissing his hand and drinking from his cup and taking it, he told us his story. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين جزاكم الله خير وبارك الله فيكم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله